Welcome back, everybody, to the Fantasy Golf Bag podcast. I'm your host, Redkacheek, and we're going to get right into it this afternoon now. Memorial Day weekend. Hopefully, you guys are having a safe and fun Memorial Day. Hopefully, you had the day off of work or whatever you do. If you play DFS full time, then there's no days off. We have MLB that just locked 10 minutes ago. So now that that's locked, we can jump into the Memorial at Muirfield Village, one of the best tour stops on the PGA Tour. This is up there. Field-wise, it's limited, but when we talk about like good golf courses, in my opinion, I think of Bay Hill, Muirfield, Riviera. Those are the top courses that are non-major courses, and Muirfield definitely is right up there. Actually, statistically, is very similar to. It's a little bit longer off the tee than Bay Hill, but very similar as far as driving accuracy, preference goes, into the greens, etc. So all in all, just one of my favorite stops. I think it's a very good test of golf. Jack Nicklaus does a very good job setting up this golf course to be difficult, fair but difficult. So it's not overly long. We'll look at the approach distributions here shortly, but the driving is very demanding, and I think in some aspects they do a better job than the USGA trying to trick up a US Open, and honestly it's probably more difficult and a better test than most PGA championships depending on the venue. So obviously a very good week. So yeah, we'll hop right into it. The only announcement that I have for fantasygolfbag.com is we done the Combo IQ sheets the last few weeks. Actually, it's probably been a month or two now. And that's essentially combining the IQ tools. So we have the off the tee, the driving IQ, and we have all the approach stuff and the approach IQ. So in my opinion, getting the best course fit, because you're taking all the data from a player that's played different courses. Players don't play the same schedule. So instead of just comparing the data as it is, whatever strokes gained says, and obviously we have Spectrum, which helps eliminate outliers, but it doesn't help eliminate the differences in the courses and the fields that the players play against. So finding a way using the IQ tools is a really good way to get a course fit where the data that we're using for the last 3 months, 4 months, or go back further if you wish, or more short term if you want to do that, which is totally fine. It's basically pulling the data into the categories that best fits the golf course. So it's a little bit closer to mimicking what they've seen over the last couple of weeks or last couple months, trying to get a better, like I said, I view it as a very good course fit model. So yeah, the update is driving IQ. If you guys pull that up this week, we'll do a Combo IQ video again for Memorial. The Combo IQ tool is getting very close. One of the steps we had to do was updating the driving IQ tool similar to approach IQ, where you can model out the weights. And I can go ahead and pull that up. So you can see if I jump to driving IQ, now you can pull in multiple buckets. And these are separated out instead of just one group. So you can see 270 to 290 and 290 to 310. You can pull all the stats or certain stats like this week, which we'll get to here in a second. We're just going to focus on strokes gained off the tee. Side note, Spectrum off the tee is coming soon, similar to Spectrum approach for the other IQ tools, and then driving accuracy. So what you do now is we can do a weighted ranking, which I'm not going to go through all of that. I can save that for the Combo IQ video because we'll have to use that. But we'll do a weighted ranking. So now we can do a percentage based on what stats you want to use, what buckets you want to use. So obviously there'll be a lot more from 290 to 310, which we'll go over. This will give you basically the same weighted model for driving for the player based on the holes they're about to see and how important different stats are. So generally speaking, strokes gained off the tee is pretty much what I use. We've done a few, alternative models where we bake in the driving accuracy higher than driving distance with off the tee. So you're basically just getting a skewed off the tee statistic towards driving accuracy. I think that's what we're going to do this week. But that is the first main update. We also have showdown projections, which you'll be able to find when you go to the showdown projections section. And it'll have, we'll load these. I'm trying to do it for FanDuel as well. The FanDuel salaries, I don't know if anyone plays FanDuel single round. They basically load all the slates at once. So the pricing for round 1, 2, 3, and 4 single round is all the same salaries, which is funny. So we'll look to do FanDuel projections as well. But this will be for the showdown stuff. You'll see their position, their score, tee time. If it's a multi-course thing, you'll see the course that they're playing, and then obviously the fantasy points and the standard deviation. So if you run your own sims, and then we'll eventually have sims for just showdown as well, that will obviously use the standard deviation to try to get you a better range of outcomes for each player. So that is the 2 main updates. So DrivingIQ, you can check that out. As always, you can give feedback if you want to see something differently or see something more or less. If something's confusing, completely fine. Just reach out and we can make that work. So let's try not to spend too much of our Memorial Day holiday on Muirfield Village, but we'll talk through it. Like I said, one of the best courses in my opinion. So Muirfield Village Golf Club. It is a par 72, 75, 69. So kind of on the higher end. I forget what we just saw a couple weeks ago. It was par 70 or 71. It was a similar yardage. So like this is kind of, it's above average length for the PGA Tour, but honestly, where these guys hit it nowadays, this is kind of going to be the standard. 7,500 yards, par 72 is pretty much a typical PGA Tour course, in my opinion, if you think about yardage per par. Last 5 winners, we have Scotty at -8, Victor Hovland -7, Billy Horschel -13, Cantley -13, John Rahm -9. So like I said, just a great venue where the scoring shouldn't get ever out of control, and they don't do a lot to trick it up besides getting the rough fairly thick. There's still enough room out there on the fairways, but if you don't drive it well, you're going to have a tough time around this golf course. That's pretty much the gist of it. And then putting obviously helps a little bit, but we'll show you here in a second. Putting is a little bit negated here, which is nice. And then obviously the lead-in stats we'll talk about. So bent grass through and through, ryegrass rough is typically what they see. We have bent grass at 13 on the stimp meter. These are very fast, good bent grass greens. Average par 3, 202. Average par 4, just under 450. And average par 5, 569. So the par 5 is kind of on the shorter side. And then you can see the hole by hole here. It's really the par 5s are the only scoring holes besides 14, which plays just slightly under par. But overall for the golf course, scoring wise, not going to be as many birdies. Going to be a few more bogeys, and the par 5s is pretty much where you get it done. Now, we don't talk about this too much, but I know guys like to look at specific scoring. And yes, like on this golf course, they need to capitalize on par 5s to do well. But when we're looking at like as a whole, there's much more that goes into it than just, oh, who did the best on the par 5s? It could be Cam Davis, but his other par 4 holes or even some of the par 3s are complete debacles. So I don't typically like to look at that. It's probably not a bad thing to look at, but honestly, the way strokes gain total works, and we have spectrum total as well, kind of all that gets baked into it. And I would prefer, even on a course where par 5 scoring is, we'll say relatively important, I would rather play a player that's been gaining more strokes in total than excelling on par 5s. There's certain ways a golf course you can kind of split it out and try to break it down. And I think just trying to keep it more simple and higher level is generally better when you're comparing an entire field. And the same goes for, like we just talked about to start the show off with the IQ tools, is guys are playing different courses, different fields. I think that's something that's not talked about enough, is how the field strength can skew strokes gained a good bit, honestly. If you think about Scotty at TPC Craig Ranch, obviously did really well scoring, but the field itself is pretty weak. So anything he does, especially in a win, is going to be more heavily skewed towards him beating the field by a lot. When if it was a stronger field, all those strokes gain numbers are going to come down a little bit, even in a win. So this field strength actually is a pretty big factor that isn't talked about enough. Average winning score, 13 under par. This is over the last 10 years. Average cut line, about 1 over par. Doesn't matter this week. Driving distance, 291, which is down off the tour average, but it's very interesting. Again, I think since we've done, I've always had the idea of, playing golf. You understand like all holes are different. Some holes are you grab driver and there's not much of a penalty, or it's wide open, or it's a par 5, you're giving it a rip, and all the other holes are kind of positioned off the tee. I think for a long time, just being quick, and this goes hand in hand with talking about like splitting out the data for a golf course and not, using high level stuff versus lower level stuff. Driving distance is one of those high level stats that almost mean nothing. Because if you look at the 292.8, there are more tee shots 290 to 310 than even at Quail Hollow. So it's a very interesting dynamic between what driving distance averages and the actual breakout of individual holes. Driving accuracy is up, which is nice to see. So even though there's a lot of drivers and a lot of longer-ish tee shots that they have to hit, driving accuracy is up, which tells me there's a preference on driving accuracy. It's not I'm going to try to hit it further and take the consequences in the rough. This is definitely a thought process off the tee to make sure, like, you still got to hit drivers, but there's a little more emphasis on making sure you're hitting your, you don't want to call it like a 90% driver, but there's less grip it and rip it's, and you're definitely trying to hit driver, but keep it in play and try to avoid the rough. And that goes right into this next stat, which is our missed fairway penalty stat. You can see it's almost half a shot of a penalty if you miss the fairway on any hole. So on average, any player that misses the fairway versus a player that hits the fairway is going to score 0.4 strokes higher when they hit it in the rough, which is pretty massive. That's in line with what we saw at TPC Sawgrass. It's in line with what we saw at Bay Hill, and we all know how thick the rough is at Bay Hill and how much we talk about it. So yeah, missed fairway penalties high, driving accuracies up. It's basically like these guys are playing the golf course properly. That's how you have to play it. Distance penalty is down, which is also interesting, being there's a lot of drivers. There's not much to be gained, or there's not much penalty if you're not above average as a driving distance. All the other stats you guys are free to look through. Some of this is on our course preview, our main tool that's free. And then this is the course preview pro, which has like distributions for driving, but you guys can look through all that stuff. The rest is into the greens. Pretty difficult. Green regulation percent is down, both from the fairway and from the rough. You can see from the rough, only 25% of approach shots are able to hit the green in regulation. Just very penalizing. 3.5, 4-inch rough. And firm greens typically, like the greens aren't easy anyways. We can see that because the green in regulation rate from the fairways down. So it goes hand in hand. Yeah, now if you don't have a clean lie, and it's probably a bad lie, you're going to have a much, much more difficult time hitting any greens, or certainly not hitting it close. Birdie or better down, bogey or worse up, kind of what we talked about already. So let's go ahead and talk about the course comparisons. I'll take out the winner, just because the winner doesn't really skew anything, but it makes the chart look, everything else is condensed. And I really just want to focus on guys that are, making it through the cut, how that differs from guys that finished in the top 25, and then those guys that finished in the top 10. So you can see here, off the tee is somewhat negated, which is interesting. There's a little bump from those who made the cut to those who finished in the top 25. We're talking about, gaining 1 stroke off the tee and then 1.5 strokes off the tee between the top 25 and top 10. Like that's basically nothing. Approach is a bigger bump from those who made the cut to those who finished in the top 25. It's actually a huge bump. For reference, for those that are listening and not watching this on YouTube or Spotify, for anybody that made the cut at Muirfield Village, they gained about a stroke on approach. Not bad, pretty good. That's in line with what we just talked about off the tee. The difference, though, is when you look at the top 25 finishers, they're gaining 2.5 strokes off the tee. So 150% increase. And then the top 25 is 3 strokes on approach. So half a stroke more. Not a big jump to the top 10. That's not a difference maker. So in those two categories, we'll just talk about the ball striking categories. We have off the tee as somewhat minimal in terms of the benefit that any player can gain from off the tee. And then approach is a big benefit off of those, like the field. And then it's a small, you can't really gain too much more against the field as you move up. It's just too difficult. The good players are all going to kind of congregate in that top 20 range. And then where's the difference? The difference is putting. So you can see here, everybody in the top 25 gain about 2 strokes putting, and everybody in the top 10 gain about 3.2 strokes putting. So over a stroke more on average for those that finish in the top 10 than those that finish in the top 25. So it's an interesting dynamic where off the tee is important for specific characteristics, like hitting fairways in these buckets we're about to talk about. Very important. You can't gain much more off the tee because there's nowhere else to drive it. Like Bryson couldn't come here. He could try, and he probably would try. There's no opportunity for him to really gain much more than the field by ripping driver 370 because he's giving up a lot when he misses. He's, whatever he gains with the extra distance, we'll call it like an extra quarter of a shot. He's losing almost half a shot because he missed the fairway. So there's definitely a give and take with the driving accuracy number, and then approach is obviously very important around Muirfield Village. And then putting makes up the difference, which makes sense. I mean, most venues, putting makes up the difference between like the good finishers and like the top 10, top 5 winners. All right, driving distance distribution. We just talked about the average being just under 292. Doesn't seem very long, right? And then we go look at the distribution of holes. We have 9 tee shots between 290 and 310. All these are right around mid, high 290s and low 300s. Like, it's a lot of drivers, and a lot of, I'll call it long drivers. Like there's certain courses where they're hitting driver and it's only going 290 to 300. This is 9 tee shots, all kind of in a tight range of 295 to 305. So it's very driver centric. There's 3 more tee shots between 270 and 290. Could go both ways. I know a couple of the tee shots are uphill, so I'm just going to assume the par 5s are drivers, and they're just not getting rolled. Usually it's pretty soft in these fairways. 277 on hole 5. It's a par 5, so that's kind of surprising. And then 285 on hole 15, which is a par 5. Also a little bit surprising. But a big chunk of this, there's 2 other tee shots. 256 on hole 1. So a layup off the tee, and then 240 on hole 14, which plays under par. So all in all, 9 tee shots between 290 and 310, 3 more, 270, 290. I'm really just going to focus on that 290 to 310 range. And like I said, we'll look at driving IQ here in a second. I think off the tee should always be baked in. It's a good overall assumption based on wherever they hit a tee shot that it's better or worse than the field. But driving accuracy, our relative driving accuracy stat, is going to be a focus point this week. I want guys that are, able to hit fairways when they're driving it 290 to 310. Pretty simple. Approach shot distribution, very spread out. I would say, just ballparking this, everything is basically tour average. So we got about 20% of approach shots from every single bucket. 125 to 150 is 15%. Everything else is right at 20, give or take. Honestly, most of these are just over. It's at 22, 22, 20 right on the dot. So pretty spread out. So when we do approach IQ later for the combo IQ video for pro members, we're going to do all those buckets, and we'll probably weight everything right at about 20% and maybe just bump 125 to 150 down slightly. So pretty straightforward, honestly. We're looking at really good precision with the irons in all those buckets, and then really good driving numbers, leaning into driving accuracy a little bit, 290 to 310. All right, lead-in form, not surprising. When we look back at the last 10 winners, so you can see that here on the screen, every single winner going back 10 years, none of them were losing strokes off the tee. Only one player was losing strokes on approach. That was William McGirt, Dirt McGirt, back in 2016. And then we have around the green has been consistently negative for a lot of winners, which is interesting. I'm not sure. That's more so to say like it's probably there's two avenues of thought, I guess. So one would be chipping out of the rough is much different than chipping off tight lies, Bermuda that they've seen the last couple months. So most of these around the green stats are likely from, you think about Victor Hovland, Patrick Cantley, Morikawa, basically coming in off of chipping from tight fairways, Bermuda, etc. And now you come to chipping around the green and it's mostly just rough. So it's a little bit different. I don't have around the green IQ yet, but that would be something I would look at is, what is their scrambling? What is their strokes gained around the green from different types of lies? And this would be one where I'm not sure I would bake it in a lot, but I would probably, ignore around the green, strokes gained around the green entirely, or use our IQ tool to, look at their around the green stats just from rough. And we could do like different thickness, 2-inch, 3-inch, 4-inch, whatever. But that's my kind of line of thinking when I look at around the green not being predictive of success, is also determining, what type of lies did they have leading into this event. And around the green is just one of those unique stats. Putting is similar, right? We think about putting splits on different types of grass types. Certainly around the green, there's guys that are better out of the rough than on fairways. And same thing with bunkers. There's some guys that are really good bunker players. So you think about short game, which goes into the short strokes gained around the green. They're not great chippers. So some of that stuff is fluid. So you just got to be careful. But I think all in all, ball striking stats are very true when you look at the lead-in form of winners here. Off the tee is huge. Approach, definitely big. I would say William McGirt was an outlier way back in 2016. Other than that, we're looking at really good tee to green numbers, good green and regulation numbers. Actually, really, really good green and regulation numbers. We're talking 5 and 7% over the field. That's really high. So you think about if the field average was hitting 2/3 of their greens, so like 66%, these guys are hitting 72 to 74%. That's a massive number. So look for good overall ball striking numbers, off the tee approach, green regulation. I don't like to use proximity, but you can see the consistency there. And then just overall scoring from a birdie or better and a bogey or worse perspective is all green. So all in all, I think this is a fantastic golf course. It rewards the good players that are playing well, hitting the ball well, managing their way around the golf course. That's what I want to focus on. What's interesting is if you look at the odds, we have John Rahm. You can kind of throw Morikawa in here. Back in COVID, 29-1. But if you look at the next couple winners, we got Rahm 19-1, Cantley 18-1, Billy Horschel was high 55-1, and then you got Victor Hovland at 20-1. So everyone's kind of around that 20-1 number, and then surely enough, Scotty at 3.5-1 won it last year. But yeah, look for the winner. It's going to be guys that have been playing well. Their stats look really good. Their odds are going to be reasonable. That's where the winner is going to come from. Plenty of field history to go through. I'm not going to go through all this right now, but guys have played this event a lot. This isn't or wasn't a signature event per se, but if you think about the invitationals like Bay Hill, Genesis, and this one, these guys, if they can, they play in it every year. So what I mean by can is they get invited. So the best players in the world get invited, and almost always they play in it year after year. So you can see a consistency, especially at the top of the board, everybody that plays it quite often. Xander has a really good track record here too, back since 2019. All right. I think that's it for the course breakdown. Just to summarize really quickly, off the tee, not something you can gain a lot in the tournament, but very important for lead-in form. And obviously, we'll look at driving IQ here in literally 30 seconds. And then approach is massive. It really is. You can't be missing a lot of greens here. It kind of goes hand in hand with driving accuracy, but being able to hit your irons well from all those different buckets is going to be vital for success here. And then a little bit of putting is going to add up to, top finishes. So with that being said, let's hop over to driving IQ and we'll bake this out. I'll show you. So as always, I would encourage you guys to check out some of the pro tools. So like the IQ tools, the Stat Model Pro, the first round leader analysis, and we have rolling stats. The spectrum data is massive. Obviously, very refined strokes gained statistics that are a lot more predictive than all-inclusive strokes gained. So all that stuff, I'll go ahead and walk through a quick rundown with driving IQ. I think this will be helpful for this week. We'll start with 290 to 310 and 270 to 290. We'll do the last 12 events. Should get a little more sample size. As we talk about every week, sample size is always something to consider when you're doing anything with golf data. So this is pretty good. 290 to 310, we got about 200 holes, give or take, and then 270 to 290, right around 100 holes. So again, you're looking at one strokes gained off the tee number. It's encompassing all those different things, and even 310 plus or 250 to 270. And we kind of just want to focus our attention a little bit more on the buckets that matter for this week. So I'm going to look at strokes gained off the tee and relative driving accuracy. We're going to do a weighted ranking. So first, you can see here, I'll load the DraftKings pricing as soon as we get done here. But we got those two buckets, and we have driving accuracy and strokes gained off the tee. So I want to get a driving model for Muirfield Village. So I basically just want to match Muirfield Village and use the data that we have that match the holes that they're going to play. So we'll take 290 to 310. What is the breakout? We got 9 to 3. Let's call it 88 or 85 to 15. How about that? It's pretty small. But that should be pretty good. We'll do 80-20. I think that's fair. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to enable the weighted rankings. 270 to 290. We'll do 20%. Pretty simple. And then 80% is the weight for the 290 to 310. Now we have two statistics that we want to weight. So if you think about this from like a matrix standpoint, we have our distance buckets, and then we have our statistics that we want to focus on this week. So I want to lean a little more into driving accuracy. So let's do like a 40-60. Strokes gained off the tee is still very valuable. So we'll do 60% to driving accuracy and 40% to off the tee. So like down here, you can see the weight matrix. So you can see we're giving like a 50% weight to driving accuracy for 290 to 310, 32% weight to strokes gained off the tee for 290 to 310, 12% to 270 to 290 driving accuracy, and then a little bit, 8% to 270 to 290 strokes gained off the tee. Pretty good. So this will give us our model. Perfect. This is what it looks like. You can see it kind of aligns pretty closely since we weighted 290 to 310 so well or so high. But you got Corey Connors, number 1, Scotty Scheffler, number 2, Aaron Rye. Again, all these guys have good sample size, so I would just monitor that. In a signature event like this, it shouldn't be a concern. But I would definitely look out, like if an amateur popped up. Alex Norn's been playing pretty good. He's only got 12 holes in that 270 to 290 range. So I'm not too concerned about that. But definitely always in the back of your mind, you run your stuff and always consider sample size. So kind of rattling off this top 10 for guys that do really well in these driving buckets. You got Corey Connors, Scotty Scheffler, Aaron Rye, Sungjae Im, Colin Morikawa, Shane Lowry, Daniel Berger, Sepp Straka, JJ Spawn. Pretty good list. Pretty good list right there. Now we could trick it up a little bit. And I'm just more curious than anything. So let's do missed fairway penalty. Let's see. Average missed fairway penalty is 0.3. Here's the issue. This is going to shrink our sample size a lot. So we'll likely have to go back to more events to get a bigger sample size. So there's a give and take here on shorter term form, which I like, and then using more data to get adequate sample size for getting this fit more precise. And it may be more precise, but it also, you're giving up, the shorter term form. So we'll do missed fairway penalty high, and you'll see this drop down quite a bit. It's not terrible, actually. 40, it drops down a lot. I mean, we're talking like a 25% or a 75% drop. So we got 46, 30, 50 holes or so, 290 to 310 off of the 200 that we saw before. I'm just going to leave it as it is for now. I think that's fine. And if we look at those numbers, so like here's a good example. There's no tee shots from Alex Noren in this 270, 290 range where missed fairway penalty was high. So it gets a little bit screwy there. But all in all, this should be a pretty good indicator of guys that played holes similar to Muirfield with similar missed fairway penalty. So that's a pretty nice matchup. We got Alex Noren first, Corey Connors second, again, just was first in the overall one. Ricky Fowler, JJ Spawn, Tommy Fleetwood, Brant Snedeker, Lucas Glover. Snedeker's got very, very small sample size, so I'd almost just throw that out. And honestly, if we bump that up against his approach numbers, he probably gets thrown out anyways. But then we got Lucas Glover, Sam Stevens, Colin Morikawa. So pretty good list there. The guys that are consistently at the top, Corey Connors, JJ Spawn, Lucas Glover, Colin Morikawa. All in all, those guys are rating out the best for driving IQ when we try to pinpoint the exact driving that they're going to see here at Muirfield Village. So Corey Connors going to probably pop in our approach IQ stuff as well. He's going to be a popular play. He should be a popular play, I should say. All right. I think that's it for today. I don't know if I want to look at anything specifically. Like we could look at driving or not driving. We'll do Spectrum Edge really quick. So we'll do like the last 4 events. So super short term sample. We'll do last 6 events. A little more. There you go. So we'll do off the tee. Yeah, Wyndham Clark actually popped a little bit. Greaserman, Aberg, which is nice to see. It's really interesting to see the guys that are positive in Spectrum and negative in strokes gained off the tee. Like it's small. Hideki's losing about 0.2 strokes off the tee, but when Spectrum, he's gaining almost a full shot off the tee, which is a massive difference. And you can do the same thing for approach. So the approach edge, ironically, Snedeker pops up here, of course. Aberg again. So Aberg might be a sneaky play, buy low opportunity. Spectrum usually is pretty forward looking. So any trends you see with Spectrum is usually a sign to start to either look at them or play them. And Aberg is kind of checking the box for both off the tee and approach. Alex Smalley looks really good. Michael Kim, similar. And then the rest are pretty much right around. Like sometimes there's not a big difference in Spectrum and strokes gained, which is fine. That just means that they haven't had any crazy outliers, good or bad. I bet Fleetwood is down at the bottom. Let's check. Fleetwood, slightly. Not bad. He's about 0.2 shots worse in Spectrum. Not terrible. He was bad last week. We can look at last week. I think he was one of the worst. Third to worst. So Tommy Fleetwood, according to strokes gained about 0.3 strokes on approach. And in Spectrum, he lost over half a shot on approach. So big difference. But that is just one event. Not too concerned with just one event, but something to pay attention to for sure, especially if he's going to be popular. That would be the reasoning I would go behind playing or fading someone, depending on the ownership. Like Aberg. Aberg should be lower owned than he would otherwise be with good form, and Spectrum showing there's some indicators that he's playing better than the actual statistics he's been doing. So he's been better off the tee. He's been better on approach. That might be, you can pull it up here as well. You can see here his finishes have been terrible. A good T5 here last year at Memorial. And if you look at here in this right side, you can see the strokes gained versus Spectrum data. Off the tee is massively higher than what strokes gained is. That's a huge indicator for good driving in the future, whether it's this week or over the next, 3 or 4 events. And then approach, slightly negative, but it's more positive than strokes gained. So yeah, I think Aberg is actually a very interesting option this week. All right. I think that'll do it, guys. Nice, easy Memorial Day podcast. So, like I said, we'll do the Combo IQ video. I'm probably just going to do it right now after I finish this up. So you can find that on the Fantasy Golf Bag blog. And as always, you guys can reach out if you have any questions or want to learn more about Fantasy Golf Bag. I'm always here to help and accommodate. We've built a few new tools just based on users' experience and what the users want to see, which is a nice flexibility that we have. So appreciate you guys tuning into the podcast. Best of luck this week. Hope you guys had a great day off to relax, and then we'll get right back into it for a nice stretch of golf into the U.S. Open and then the Open over the next month and a half or so. All right, guys. See ya.